Hello, this is Sherman Haywood Cox II of LearnBlackPreaching.com. In this video, we're going to discuss how to expand a sermon outline into a sermon. A prerequisite for this particular video is that you have a sermon outline and you want to actually present that sermon outline. One of the assumptions that we make in this particular video is that a sermon is a series of points. A sermon has a number of points. We should emphasize that these points are related to a larger point. So you have one major point that you're trying to present in the sermon, and you have subpoints that support or promote the particular one point that you are trying to present in the sermon. Each of these subpoints must do four things if you're going to expand that point effectively in a sermon, and that's what we're going to look at in this particular video. The first of these points is that it should define the point that you're presenting. Every one of your subpoints, you must, when you are expanding it, clearly define what you're saying and what the point means. If the people don't understand the point, then the people cannot apply the point, and you can do nothing else with the point. So the first thing that you must do is clearly define what the point means. Secondly, you should illustrate the point. You should illustrate the point. You can do that with many sources. One of these sources is the Bible. The Bible should be our primary source for illustrations, where we go there and use some of the important stories from the tradition, from the Christian tradition. Another source that we can use is the hymns and songs. That's not on our outline, but you can actually use hymns, you can use songs, you can use gospel songs. These things from the Christian tradition can actually be a source for illustrations. Another thing is to use history to illustrate the point. This history could be African American history, it could be African history, it could be world history, American history, any type of history. These things can be used to illustrate particular points from our sermon. Another thing is current events. For example, not too long ago we had a plane go down where the pilot actually saved the day. That could actually be an illustration of a sermon, depending on the point that you're presenting. Current events such as that, but also one should never forget the mundane points of life. For example, Frederick D. Haynes actually did an illustration where he used baking a cake as an illustration for God's work in some way. Others have used navigating the way to a airport on a taxi, how the taxi driver knew the way to go to the airport, the back way to get you there on time. So one should look at current events, but also not be afraid to look at some of the more mundane, some of the regular, some of the common things of life. Another thing is news and television. I would also include some of the things from popular culture. These are things that are going on right now. News, for example, 9/11. There are some things that are just so big that they must be addressed. 9/11 was actually one of those events. You can use illustrations to begin to address some of these. I would encourage you to be careful when doing that, to remember that there are people in your congregation possibly who have been directly affected by certain events that have happened in the world. However, one must not be afraid of using contemporary events to illustrate particular ideas. Another very important thing is we must make sure that the story that we use illuminates or strengthens the point that we are seeking to present. Sometimes when we use different illustrations that don't necessarily promote the point that we are seeking to present, people will remember the story and it will detract from the particular sermon point that we are presenting. Stories are powerful, and if you are not careful, they will completely obliterate the point and remove from the people's mind the point. So I think that it's important to do a couple things. First of all, keep in mind, keep in the minds of the people the point of why you are bringing the story up, and secondly, only use points that are directly related to the point that you are attempting to illuminate. Another point, another thing that we must do in all of our subpoints is we must apply it. We must show how I, as a human being, can apply this point to my daily living. You got to show me how I can use it. It's one thing to tell me what a point is. It's another thing to tell me to illustrate the point through something in history or some other way of illustrating it. But it's another thing to tell me how I can use this in my daily life. How can I make this real in my life today? And that's what you would do in this application portion of every point. Next, we must connect the point to the scripture. Demonstrate and describe how the point is clearly derived from the text. It's one thing to have a point that is derived from the text. Hopefully, all of our points are derived from the text. However, we must, in our sermon presentation, show how the point is clearly derived from the text. Sometimes you'll hear preachers do this by saying things like, such as, "Look at the text. Here it says in the text. You don't believe me? Look in the text." And then they read the portion of the text and they show how the point is clearly derived from that particular point, from that particular text. It's important to recognize that if we do not show this clear connection to the text, we will rob our sermon of power, for in the minds of many, the scripture is where our power is. And in the mind, and not only in the minds, but in my own understanding of preaching, it is in the text where we gain our power. So we must clearly show the connection to the text if we are going to present an effective sermon and illustrate and illuminate the point effectively. To summarize, we must, when we have our sermon outline for each and every one of our points. Point 1, you must define the point, illustrate the point, apply the point, connect the point to scripture. Point 2, define the point, illustrate the point, apply the point, and connect the point to scripture. And then on and on to all of your points. Once again, to reaffirm, defining the point, you must clearly state what the point means, illustrate the point. You must use various sources to illustrate the point, apply the point, show how the point can be made real in the lives of the people, and finally, you must connect, show how the point is clearly connected to the scripture. One point that we should emphasize is that you do not necessarily have to do all 4 of these for every one of your points, but for most of your points you should do all 4 and at least 3 of the 4. Next, and more importantly, you do not have to follow this order. You can mix and match the ordering of these. You can define the point later, illustrate the point later, apply the point. You can mix and match it to provide some sort of a variation in our presentation. But as I said before, you should have most of these ways of illuminating a particular point in your sermon. I thank you for listening to this video and looking at this video. Please visit learnblackpreaching.com. You can find other resources like this one. Once again, my name is Sherman Haywood Cox II. God bless you.